Welcome, programmer. Today we're going to do a quick Java program. Special shout out to Kevin for sending me this information. So let's get right into it. We're going to go step by step. Question 1 and 2. I haven't finished question 3 yet, but I'll do that in a separate video. So let's start with question 1. Write a dice yi class. I'm guessing yi stands for your initial, one instance, one variable. So let's go ahead. I've already started on a BlueJ a new project. So I'm going to create a new class, and they're telling us to do dice yi. I'll just call it yi, like your initial. You can put whatever you want there, but sure, yi. Let's get in there and let's build this thing. So it's got all kinds of default stuff. I think you already know this part. So I'm just going to clear that up. I do know I will need to import the random utility and instance variable. Yep, I do know I need one. And the first one, it says instance variable called value. Yep, okay. Let's put that on there. And this is where the constructor is. Okay, looks like they've already assembled that for us. Get rid of that. To clean this up too. Okay, so here's our constructor with a parameter for the initial face value. Validate that it allows only 1 to 6. Okay, so it wants us to put a parameter inside the face value, which is kind of strange because why would I want to do that? But if it's what they want, we'll do it. So I can put here as a parameter, I'll put their initial value. I can put it any variable name I want. I'll just call it initial value. And it wants us to validate. So we're going to validate this value. And we do so by doing an if statement. So if initial value, say less than 1, or initial value is greater than 6. So if these were the case, we can throw an error. In this case, I'll just throw a printout, print line, and value error, something like that. Okay. And of course, we have an else statement. Otherwise, it's good. So we will then set our instance variable as whatever it is that's passed in. So value equals initial value. Okay, so that takes care of that. Next, we'll need an accessor. In fact, let me label these guys. This is A. And it looks like they've got a sample here for us to use. We can use this. Clean that up a little bit. Okay, so this is where B is going to go. Accessor called get value returns an integer. Okay, so public int. This just is going to be get value. And all this is going to do is return whatever value is. So value is going to be set somewhere here or later in another method. And we're just going to return whatever it is. So value. Okay, simple enough. Next, we'll go to C. This one's a mutator. So this will be a set. So this one's going to be a void. Let's see. It's public void. And we're going to set the value to whatever it is that's being passed in. So public void set value. And let's just call it data, whatever it is being passed in. So in other words, a user can choose whatever number they want to put in, and we will set that as the value. But it does say we need to validate to make sure that it is 1 or a 6. So similarly, I'm going to actually just take this whole thing. I'm going to copy that part. paste it in. Instead of initial value, we're going to check the data. So if the data that's passed in is good to go, we'll set it in, of course, right there. Otherwise, throw another error again. So that takes care of C. Validate only 1 to 6. Yep. And then next one. Here, let me just get more spacing here. Next one, we have D. We have what's called a roll. So it's kind of like rolling the dice. So we're going to use our random variable here. So this one's also a void function. Just going to call it roll. And what does it want it to do? It wants us to randomize the instance variable 1 to 6. So initially we had this at some value, some arbitrary value that users can set. Now we're going to set it to be some random number, and we're going to utilize the random method. So just the keyword for random, and we can call it rand. This is just a variable name. You can call it whatever you want. Rand. I'll just call it rand. And we'll use the new random, making a new object, random object. And I'm going to use, this is also just another variable. I'm going to call upon what I just created. I'll say next int. And since I want it to be between 1 and 6, I'll take the max minus the minimum plus 1. That should give us between 1 and 6. So this is the part that rolls it, and now I'm going to set it, the instance variable. So set instance variable equal to random int. Perfect. So this is our roll. Next, we have a toString, which is just as the name implies. It's just gonna print the numbers instead of integers. We're gonna change them over to a string. So this is E. So this is a return statement. So it needs to return a string. So it's going to look like this: public string. Let's call it toString. And we are going to return. First, we need to convert. So we have an integer, and we're going to convert it to a string. And we use this method, capital I integer dot toString, and we pass in our integer, which is value. That will give us a string. So whatever number that was stored in the roll, or whatever number was in the value, when we put it through this, it'll spit it out as a string. And finally, we have a print me method, which is just for debugging, not really needed for the program, but it's good to have so we can see what's going on. So it's just going to be a simple void print me. And this will simply print. And we're going to call upon the toString method. So we can just call this guy. So let's call that function. Okay, so there we have it. I'm going to hit compile. No errors. Great. So we're going to have to test this out. Two ways we can do this. We can create a main right here on the bottom, but I'm looking at this program and it says we're going to need to write a client later. So let's go ahead and create a client right now to test all these methods. So let me just head back out into, let's see here. And I'll compile this so that gets rid of those lines. I'm going to create a new class, and I'll call this my client. I'll just call it client, or I'll just follow this, dice game one, your name. So I'll just dice game one, my name's BK. So this is basically our client. Okay. All right. And I'm going to go in there. And let's see, I don't really need any of these for now. But what I do need is a way to test it. And the simple way to test it would be to create a public static void. Let me here we go. Public static void main string array with the arguments. Okay. All right, and let's call upon the object. We have our class object of type dice yi. So I'm just going to put there my object is dice yi. I'm going to call this object, say, game1 equals new dice yi. And let's look at the constructor. The constructor demands that we have one parameter. We're following his specifications. So this one, we're just going to stick a value in there just for testing purposes. I'm going to stick the number 5 in there. So 5 is going to be the initial value that's stuck in there. And it's obviously not an error, so it'll be initialized into value. And then I can test each one of these out. I can get the value, I can set a different value, I can roll it, and I should be able to print it. So let's test them out. So I've set that. Now I'm going to try to call upon, let's see, get value. Let's see, get value is just going to print it out for me. So I can do it like this, system.out.print line. This is the get value plus it'll be, oh, I need my variable name, game1.get value. So that should take care of that. And let's try a set value. I'm going to set the number. Let's see, I'll do game1.set value. I'm going to change it to a 2. Okay, so the set value, I'm going to change it to a 2. It should change the number to 2. And I'm going to get the value again to make sure that it works. So again, this is all just testing. So over here, I should see a 5 getting printed out. Over here, I should see a 2 getting printed out. And then finally, I'm going to do a roll, game1.roll. And the roll is simply going to give us some random number. And I don't want to get it again. I will simply call upon the print me function to just print out what we have. Okay. So I'll just do game1.print me. Okay, so let's hit compile, no errors, great. So let's go back out to our main page, and I should be able to run it using this, hit that, and okay. So as expected, we have here, our first get value was 5. Yep, I set that in as 5 in the beginning, and then I changed it to 2, and then finally, when I rolled it, it's some random number, it prints out a 3. Great, so all our methods work, and we can continue to the next part. Let's see, what's it say in the next part? Write a subclass dice pair yi with a 2-element array of dice yi. Okay, and let me see. We're going to have to create a subclass, and we're going to call this dice pair yi. Okay, great. Let's get in there. And here it wants us to create a subclass of dice yi. So with that being said, we actually need to call upon the extend keyword. So we're going to extend dice yi. So what this gives us is it allows us to use the methods in dice yi. So what we're doing here, this dice yi is what's called the superclass, and dice pair yi is an extension of the superclass. So that makes this the subclass. All right. And before I continue, again, I'm going to need to import my random utility. And okay, now we have a 2-element array of dice yi. This is the part that gets pretty iffy for me as well. I'm not exactly sure if your professor means a dice yi with 2 elements or size 2 array, or just an array that takes in 2 variables, and those variables will be whatever values we got from the dice yi. I think the latter would make more sense. It doesn't make more sense. It doesn't make much sense to me, at least, to create an array where each element is going to be an object. And the object for the dice yi anyway is an integer. So that seems to be an easier way to go instead of creating an array of objects, dice yi. And I'll show you what I mean. And how I have it set up is, okay, I'm going to create my instance variables, private int. It's going to be an array. I'll just call it array. You can call it whatever you want, even if, I mean, if he really means, oh, just name your array dice yi, sure, we can do that. No, there's no issue with that. But for now, I'll just call it ARR for array. And it's going to be an integer of size 2 array, or array of size 2. Get rid of that. Okay. And now looks like they've already created a constructor for us. But really, when we're dealing with constructors, I don't need the public there. I just need the title. So the title will match exactly. So now it's giving us errors here and there. Of course, I didn't need to clean it up a little bit. Here, let me get rid of this. Okay. So let me look at the question again. Default constructor, use random class methods to initialize each dice yi. So the question is, how do I access each dice yi? So this whole thing, the whole point in creating this was to create a dice, or one die. So one die will have some random number. We're going to use that. And then that's one object. And then since we want a pair, we need to create 2 of these dice yi's. And all we need is the number from it. And then we will have a pair. So we're going to have a pair of numbers. So right here, you'll see an error, constructor dice y cannot be applied because it requires some integer, no arguments found, and stuff like that. So when you see this error, you know, I can continue all I want, but the reason I have this error is because I need to initialize this first. Dice yi, since I am extending it, that means that this constructor is going to be run. It's going to be created. So this constructor is going to happen. And as a matter of fact, I don't really need this one here either. It's just, yeah, it's just common practice to, when we're dealing with constructors, to not put the security on there, public, private, or protected. But over here, since I am calling upon dice yi, I'm going to have to, initialize it, or rather instantiate it. So the way we can do this is using the super keyword. And I hope he taught you this. And super, it basically means I am invoking the superclass, which, like I mentioned before, is the dice yi. This is your superclass. And the superclass has a constructor with one parameter. So all we got to do is do the super and then place one parameter. And again, the number is completely arbitrary. Let's say I put a 3 on there. So that takes care of that error. All I'm doing here is I'm instantiating the object dice yi like this. So this is the super, and this is the number 3 that I put. All right. So now that we have that, this is basically an object I can use, an object of type dice yi. And I'm going to, instead of creating again, instead of using the whole random thing here, well, I'm actually going to utilize what I've already created here. Now that I have my super object that I'm using in a different class, a subclass, I can just call upon roll, I can call upon set value, I can call upon any of these guys. And in particular, I want to call upon roll because roll already has the random generator and it's going to set the value by itself anyway. So instead of rewriting it, I can borrow this code. So it'll look like this. It'll be super.roll. All right. So this will give me some number that is going to be stored into value. And now I just need that value. I need that value and I'm going to store it into my array. And this array is basically just 2 numbers that will represent each die. So how I'm going to do that is I have my array. I want index 0. So that'll be the first position. And I'll set it to equals super. Again, I had just rolled it. Now I just need that value. I'm going to get value. Right? And remember, get value is just a number. It's just returning whatever value was set before. So the value was set here, whatever random number, and now I am getting it. So I get that. This takes care of my first number, or rather my first integer element. And my second one, array at index 1, I will need to, well, before I initialize it, let's roll it again because I want both to be random. So I'm going to do another super.roll. Now this is a new random number. I'm going to set it to equal super.get value. All right. So this is my interpretation of how the default constructor should be. It's going to initialize each dice yi. So this is one dice yi, and this is another dice yi, and I'm invoking the super, which is basically the dice yi itself. All right. So next, okay, let me set this to A again. Next, we have a constructor with a parameter for the initial phase values. Validate that it only allows 1 to 6. So this is an example of overloading functions. So we already have one constructor. Now they're saying, oh, I need another constructor with a parameter. So as the name implies, constructors, they have to match the name of your class. So I'm going to have to create another constructor, dice pair yi. And of course, if I did this, they're going to give me some issue saying, oh, I already have one. It already exists. It's already defined in class. Great. But what overloading is, overloading will actually have the same name, but different arguments in there. So this one is specifically says with the parameter for the initial phase value. And I'm going to pass in some data, whatever number that you give me, that's an integer. And I'm going to validate that number. So the same thing here. Since it is a constructor, I can't go any farther until I initialize my super object, my dice yi object. So the first thing that needs to happen is this, and I'm going to pass in, instead of just sort of some random number now, it is going to be data. So I will create that super data. And now I just have to check, is data good? So it says to validate. Of course, it already happens here. So while it's kind of redundant, I'll just follow, what he says on the question, just because why not? Well, we can validate. There's no harm in validating twice or three times or so on. Well, maybe it's just they want us to practice the validation part. So here we're just going to do if data is less than 1 or data is greater than 6, we'll do something. We'll throw another error. And this is technically not a throw. This is just a print. But it'll let the user know, hey, you gave us a bad number. Value error. Okay. And of course, if all is good, then we have to do what we did here, but instead of getting the value from the super, we're actually just going to get the value from here. Okay. and I don't really like this very much because this is just one number. So I have a feeling that perhaps constructor of the parameter for the initial phase values, perhaps I might be mistaken, and maybe I do need 2 numbers. But for now, I'll just stick it with this. This is pretty much a work in progress. And, if you find anything that's wrong or if it doesn't make sense, feel free to let me know and we can go ahead and fix it. So for now, I'll just, for simplicity's sake, I'll just set them both faces, or rather both dice, to the same number in this case. And I'm really not going to use this very much because I'd rather, when we roll a dice, I'd rather leave it to chance, leave it to, random generator. This is setting the dice to a desired number, and nobody really plays dice like that anyway. So we're going to be using this guy more, and this constructor makes more sense than this. Okay, so that will take care of that. Next, we have an accessor for get value. I see the I here, which returns the value of the first or second die. So this means that we're probably going to need 2 get values, 1 for each die, 1 for the first or the second. So let's go ahead and build that. It's just public int get value 1. And simple enough, it's just going to return the value 1 is array at index 0. Okay. And same thing for the second one. Get value 2 will be array at index 1. Okay. Next, we'll go to D, which is get total. Okay, so get total, we're just going to add array 0 and array 1. Okay. Let me see, D, we have public. Oops, it is going to return a number, so I need int get total. Put space in there. And all we're going to do here is return array at index 0 plus array at index 1. Okay. Next, we have set value. So it'll be similar to the other one. And instead, let's see, I've got set value to set value. Let dice yi validate that it only sets 1 to 6. So this one, he's specifically telling us to use dice yi. So this is a clue for me. I'm not going to be using the local variables here. I'm actually going to be using super. And that's the only way, or rather that is the way to access dice yi, because dice yi is our super class. So this is how we build it. And it's going to be a void since we're setting it. Set value 1. And value 1 is we need to, well, this is if you want to set a dice number, and we need some number. We'll call it data again. Okay. And here I'm going to call upon super, and I'm going to use super's set value. So this, I'm back here in dice yi, my superclass, and the set value here already has a validation. So it is already saying let dice yi validate it. So this is going to validate it, so I don't have to rewrite the whole thing again. I'll just say set value, and I'll pass in that number, and this number will then be brought over here, and it will validate it for me. And if everything's good, it will change the number inside here. Okay, so if this is all good, no errors, then I can simply set my first array, or value 1, to be whatever that value that I just set. I'm going to get it. Okay. And we'll do the same thing for value number 2. Okay, and instead of array 0, it'll be array 1. All right. Oops, I forgot to label this. This is E. Okay. Next, I have a roll. So a roll is going to be pretty similar to what we did before, but this one, it's going to randomize each dice yi in the array. So this tells me that, well, we could again use this right here, the super.roll, or I could just create a local one. And just to demonstrate that it really doesn't matter, we could use our local variables. So I'm going to just create another random roll and set it into my array. So it'll actually look very similar to this one right here. But this one obviously only sets it to 1 dice. But this, since this is a pair of dice, we're going to set it to 2 dice. So public void roll. Again, call upon the random. I'll call it rand, new random. So I'm going to have num1. So I'll call it rand num1 equals rand dot next int. It's got to be capital int. Same thing, 6 minus 1 plus 1. And I'll copy this out. And this will be my number 2. Okay. And now that I have 2 random numbers, I'm just going to hard code it in. Array 0 will be rand num1. Array index 1 will be rand num2. So this is it. This is the whole thing for, what was it? F. Yep. Letter F. Mutate a roll which randomizes each dice yi in the array. So this does exactly pretty much the same thing as this, but we're accessing directly into the dice yi array that we created up here. So I look at this as probably like a fail-safe. You know, if this didn't work, then we'll go here, or if the sets didn't work, then we'll just, you know, this will do it locally. We're not invoking the superclass here. We're just invoking our local variables, array 0 and array 1. So this will work for sure. It has to. So let's go on to G. And this is going to be the same thing. And it says toString method to return a string like this, 3, 4 or 6, 5. Okay. Let's go ahead and do that. It is going to return a string, so string, and it's called toString. And here, I like to gather my data together and then return it one shot, because I could actually just do a return and then do, you know, just put one line of code here. But what I like to do is split up my data into 2 and then combine them. Now I'll show you what I mean here. I've got my first number. So this number here, whatever this is, this or this, I need to retrieve it. So let's retrieve that. It'll be retrieve it and create it into a string. Change it to toString, and I'll pass in my array at index 0. Oops. Okay, so that'll be num1. And my second number to convert, num2, array at index 1. Now that I've got both my variables here, my first number and my second number, they're both in string, finally I can return it like this. Num1 is a string, and then I need to concatenate, oops, I need to concatenate a comma and a space in there and concatenate the second number. So this should give us something that looks like this. All right. Finally, we have an equals method. Okay, let's see what they want us to do. FG, H. The equals method will compare a pair of dice with another pair of dice. So, okay, so there's going to be some comparisons, and it says return true. So this gives me a clue that it's going to be a true or false, which means it's going to be a Boolean. So I can actually get started here. It's going to be a type Boolean, and the name is just called equals. And let's see. Let's get it open there. So it returns true if they have the same face values. So after we roll the dice and we throw it, if I have one pair that looks like 4 and 6 and another pair that's 6 and 4, it's the same thing. So we should have it return true. So this means that my object that is invoking this equals method will need to be compared to another object, and that object has 2 integers. So I have my, well, 2 integers meaning 2 dice. So it's going to be, I just call it num1, or let's just call it face 1. The first face, and we'll call it the second face. And again, you can call it whatever you want. And now we're going to compare. So my first dice, if the first face is the same as the second dice, face 1, then, and face 2 is equal to the same as face 2, or vice versa, face 1 is equal to face 2, and face 2 is equal to face 1, then we return true. So in this case, what are we really comparing? We're actually going to compare the array values. So we have set array index 0, index 1. We're going to compare these guys to these guys. Okay. If, I'll call it face 1. If face 1 is the same as array at index 0, and face 2 is equal to array at index 1. Okay, so this is one instance. But what about the other way around, where face 1 is equal to array at 1? So you have an or. Face 1 is equal to array at index 1. And face 2 is equal to array at index 0. This will simply return true. So again, I am, oh, what is this? Illegal start of expression. Let's see. Okay, so it doesn't like that. Oh, I am missing a whole thing. Yes, I'm missing something here. I need this, and I need this. Okay, so this will take care in the instance where if you have a 4 and a 6 and a 6 and a 4, it will validate and check if they're equal. And similarly, if it's 4, 6, 4, 6, this will take care of it here, right? Okay, so obviously If anything else, then return false. So the likelihood of this being true, I mean, it can happen, but not going to happen too often. 4 and 6 and 6 and 4, or 4, 6, 4, 6. So since it's completely random, we can expect that it's going to be false a lot of the time, unless we go in there and set it ourselves, right? But so that should take care of that. Now we can finally do a print me just for debugging. So it's going to be the same thing as before, I. And for debugging, let's do a public void, same thing, print me. And this is simply going to system.outPrint. And it says here, should simply print the value in toString. I already created toString here. Let me put a new line in there. Okay. And I will just call upon toString. Okay. All right. So before we go any farther, and I really can't go any farther until I myself have finished this, but I think now that we've set the whole thing up, I'll leave it to you to come up with the logic for this one. And if you have any problems, feel free to let me know, and I'll work with you on that. Okay. But let's test to make sure that all our methods that we just created work. So I'm just going to hit compile. Looks good. I'm going to go back to my client, and here, let's test our new dice pair yi. So let me just get rid of all this. In fact, I'll just comment it out so we can test it for later. Now, dice pair yi. Let's call upon dice pair yi. It is an object. I'm going to call it, I'll call this player 1. It's going to be equal to dice pair, dice pair yi. Got that. So this is player 1, and, or rather dice 1. I should call it just dice 1. It's not really player. Dice 1. You know what? Dice pair 1. So it's a pair of dice, and I'm going to do another pair of dice just for testing purposes. Dice pair 2 is equal to new dice pair yi. Okay, so I've got 2 of those, and I'm just gonna do, well, it's obviously going to do a roll of randoms, and let me get those values and print them out to see if they work. And I can get the totals too. So I want to test to make sure that my gets work, that my totals work. The sets, not really worried about that, but I'll leave it to you if you want to test it. And I want to test my roll, just make sure that it rolls, and check my Booleans to see if they work. So let me do the gets first. So with these two, they're going to have their own random values that'll be created. So I'm actually going to borrow this system.getValue. Instead of game1, it's going to be dice pair 1.getValue. I have no idea what number is going to be there. And copy this out. This is going to be dice pair 2 get value. So I should see a printout of 2 numbers here. And so that'll take care of my get values. Let's get value. Oh, right. Well, get value 1, get value 2. So let me see. Get value 1. Get value 1. Get value. Yeah, you know what? This is going to be pretty complicated. So I'm actually going to, since I know that get values will be used here in my toString, yes, I will do that instead. Actually, yeah, we can work it out. So let me do this. Get value 1, and this is value 1 of 2. Oh, wait, sorry. This is value 2 of 2. This is 1 of 2. So this is value 1. This is value 2, right? So get value. I'll put here D1, dice 1. This is dice 2, 1 of 2. And dice 2, get value 1. Similarly, I will basically do this. Dice 2, 2 of 2, the second value. Okay, so this will give me a bunch of numbers, but now I want to print out the total. Let's see if the total works for just dice 1. Oh yeah, let's do that. Okay, get me total for D1. It'll be dice pair 1 dot get total. So this will give me some total, which I expect will be this plus, well, this plus this should give me this. And then next I'm going to do a roll. I want to do another roll. So I will do dice pair 1 dot roll. And I'll do dice pair 2 dot roll. Okay. And I want to check and see if they, well, I want to see what they print out first. So I'll actually do this, the toString method on both of them. And this I can do system.out. And this will give me the dice. Should be dice 1 pairs. And this will give me dice pair 1 dot toString. Okay. So this will just give me my values, dice 2 pairs. It'll be dice 2, toString. And this should give me in the format of like this, some number, comma, and another number. And then finally, I'm going to test and see if they're equal or not. So if they are equal, I should see the word true. If not, then it won't be, then it'll just say false. So this, I'll do a print out again. I will say, I'll actually do this. I will do dice pair 1 dot, I'll call upon the equal method, equals dice pair 2. And again, if I look into my Boolean, I need to pass in 2 numbers. And this one, I'll just call upon dice pair 2, get value 1 and get value 2. Okay. Dice pair 2, get value 1. And the second argument will be dice pair 2 dot get value 2. Okay, so it looks like we are good to go. And anything else? Oh, okay, we can do a print me just for testing. Sure, we can do that. Why not? And let me see. Oh, I'm missing one parentheses there. And why not? I'll call upon the print me. Dice pair 1 dot print me and dice pair 2 dot, oh, it should be capital M, print me. All right. I think we're ready to test this guy out. Okay. So let me do this so we can see what's going on. All right. I have my client here, going to the main. Okay. Oh, there we go. So the first one, get value of D1. My first value is 4. Second value is 2. So this is 4. This is 2. Second dice, I have 1. And then a 2. So my total looks like it works because the total for D1 is obviously 4 and 2. That's 6. Great. And then I rolled it again. And now my numbers are jumbled up again. My new pairs will be 2 and 3 and 5 and 4. So this is what they're printing out, 2 and 3, 5 and 4 in the format that he asked for. And this is basically showing if it's true or false. So obviously 2 and 3 and 5 and 4, they're both false. And then the print me methods just print the numbers in the way that he wants with the commas there. So it looks like this works pretty well so far. And now with the tools that you've created, with the methods that we've created, you may be able to continue on, or you should be able to continue on. And if you can't, that's okay, to continue on to the next part. So I'll do that in another video. Have fun with these methods, test them out, change out some things if you like, and experiment with it. And I'll see you in the next video. All right.